When people talk about Rachel Reid's heated rivalry series, the comments section is usually dominated by two names, Ilya and Shane, and it's easy to see why. We love watching complex character arcs unfold. We have Ilya Rozanov, charismatic, sharp-tongued, a full-on asshole with layers, and Shane Hollander, closed off, rigid with clear traits of ASD. Their relationship is a constant collision of two different worlds, every dialogue throwing sparks, every game testing the limits. Against that backdrop, the story of Scott and Kip in Game Changer tends to get read as the calm before the storm, or worse, as a filler chapter that we would happily skip. Why does this happen? Because on the surface, Scott and Kip seem too straightforward. Scott Hunter is the league's golden boy, suspiciously wholesome and easy to read. Psychologically, we are almost always more drawn to the difficult characters who are painfully working their way toward being better than to the ones who seem like the good guy from the start. Then there's the classic rich and poor trope. At its core, this is a modern Cinderella story. One is a dazzling superstar who showers his partner with attention, luxury, and gifts. And the other is a regular guy who receives it all with genuine gratitude and wonder, because he has never before come anywhere near private jets and five-star hotels. We are so conditioned by the toxic push-pull and emotional explosions of other couples that we risk missing the most important thing. The way this story, beneath its apparent simplicity, contains a fundamental lesson about how to hold on to your dignity and your sense of self, even when your partner is someone the entire world is in love with. A lot of us make the mistake of treating Game Changer as optional supplementary material to the main Ilya and Shane story. The logic goes, if we already know the stars, why spend time on Scott? But this book is not a side plot. It is the psychological foundation without which the entire architecture of heated rivalry loses a critical support. The central value of this story is not even really about the couple themselves. It is about the effect they have on the whole league, and specifically on Ilya Rozanov. Without a deep acquaintance with Scott, the coming out in heated rivalry would land for us as a dry biographical fact. We only genuinely feel for people we know. This is the episode where we see Scott not as a poster boy hero, but as a real person who chose to break the system. And that choice becomes the pivotal trigger for Ilya. Watching Scott, Ilya arrives at the most important thought of his arc. He did it, which means I can too. I'm no less than him. Scott's example gives Ilya both the confidence and the internal permission to stop hiding and get himself to that cottage. Without the precedent Hunter sets, Ilya and Shane's path could have stretched on for years longer. Scott kicked the door open. Ilya walked through it. To skip this episode is to miss where the courage came from, the courage that changed the rules for everyone. The series doesn't show us much of the PR machinery or the direct institutional fallout from their actions, but it shows us something more important, the human ripple effect. We see how one couple's story becomes the catalyst for another. Game Changer is the book that lets us understand that Scott's coming out was not just a tabloid scandal. It was a personal example that allowed Ilya Rozanov to believe his own script of freedom was possible. If Ilya and Shane are about pushing through, about internal fractures and emotional storms, then Scott and Kip are arguably the most psychologically healthy couple in the entire series. And that is precisely why their story gets called boring. In a world where we have learned to feel for characters through their pain and their codependency, a relationship without unnecessary drama reads as bland. But let's look more carefully. In Scott and Kip's relationship, we see something that is genuinely rare in fiction, actual partnership. Their closeness is not built on sparks and ice. It is built on everyday chemistry, real support, and a shared sense of humor. Neither of them tries to reshape the other or colonize the other's space. This is that rare model of relationship in which two people are not completing each other into a whole, but remain two autonomous individuals who simply enjoy being together. There are no toxic push-pull dynamics here, no one running away while the other chases. Instead, there is open conversation and a genuine attempt to understand what the other person needs. For Scott, living in a world of rigid contracts and image obligations, his relationship with Kip is the only space where his limits are respected rather than attacked. Rachel Reid shows us a situation in which secrecy is not just a game of hide-and-seek, but an existential weight Scott carries. He is not hiding because it is convenient. He is hiding because what is at stake is his entire life as he knows it. The fear of losing his career and everything he has built is so immense that he is prepared to lock his personal life inside four walls. In this relationship, we watch an invisible wall of secrecy slowly grow taller than everything the two of them feel for each other. This is not merely an inconvenience. It is a fundamental obstacle that makes any shared future impossible. And it is precisely here that the ground is laid for their separation. Scott's fear of exposure turns out to be stronger than his readiness to build something in the open. Only by losing Kip does he go through the transformation that makes him understand. Life without the person you love costs far more than the safety you bought with constant concealment. Now we get to the most important character in this story. On the surface, Kip looks like the classic Cinderella, a regular guy who gets a window into a world of private jets and luxury hotels through his prince. But look more closely. And Kip is the complete opposite of that fairy tale archetype. In most stories of this kind, the celebrity's partner quickly becomes a beautiful accessory, a supporting role whose entire life revolves around the famous person's schedule. Kip flatly refuses that role. Despite every pull of Scott's world, he maintains his autonomy. He looks for work. He plans to apply for a graduate program. He builds his own trajectory. He does not want to be Scott Hunter's boyfriend. He wants to be Kip, someone with his own value independent of who he shares a bed with. The climax of the story, Kip's decision to leave, is one of the rarest examples in the genre of non-codependent behavior in an unequal relationship. In most plots like this, the less famous partner spends years enduring it for love. Kip understands something they usually don't. Permanent secrecy is a slow erosion of his personhood. He understands that secrecy is not simply the absence of public appearances together. It is a life lived inside a lie. It is never being able to hold your partner's hand on the street. It is the permanent, knowing feeling that your relationship is second class in the eyes of the world. Kip is not prepared to wait indefinitely for Scott to find his courage, because his own time and his own peace of mind matter to him more than the status of being in a relationship with a star. There is an important nuance that tends to get overlooked. Why was Kip able to do this? Because he had foundations that had nothing to do with Scott. His family and friends are not background decoration. They are his bedrock. Having that solid support system means he does not have to cling to a relationship that is damaging him, however glamorous it might look from the outside. He does not leave so that Scott will chase him. That would be a manipulative trope. He leaves because his self-respect weighs more than the status of being someone's secret. Kip demonstrates that love is not a justification for self-destruction. And this radical act of self-love becomes the precise turning point that forces Scott to recognize the quiet, predictable safety of the closet is actually a solitary cell, one in which he is slowly losing the most important thing he has. To truly understand the scale of Scott Hunter's transformation, you need to look behind the facade of his success and register how deep and total his loneliness was before Kip arrived. We are accustomed to seeing him as the lucky one, the golden boy of the league. But behind that immaculate image is a person whose life was built on the ashes of loss. Scott lost his parents as a teenager. In the precise period when a young person most needs a secure foundation, he was left entirely alone. Hockey became everything. His family, his home, his only route to survival. The league literally gave him everything: education, identity, a reason to exist. For Scott, sport was never just a career the way it might be for someone else. It was the only foundation his personality was built on. To lose, hockey would not have meant simply losing a salary. It would have meant ceasing to exist, losing the only connection to the world he had. And this is where the most painful difference between Scott and Kip lies. Kip always had a powerful human resource behind him, a loving family and loyal friends who would have accepted him regardless. Scott had no safety net at all. His isolation was absolute. Imagine spending years at the center of a male-dominated, aggressively masculine environment where crude homophobic jokes are the everyday background noise. In locker rooms and during training, Scott was constantly surrounded by the implicit message that people like him had no right to be there. That fear did not dull over time. It grew, and it became paralyzing. He had no one to confide in. He could not open up even to the teammates closest to him because the risk of losing everything was too great. When Kip enters his life, it is not simply a romance for Scott. It is the first experience of unconditional acceptance he has ever had. But years of surviving alone and protecting his perfect facade cause him to make the mistake of trying to fit Kip into his world of secrecy. His prolonged refusal to come out is not cowardice. It is the defense mechanism of a person who has learned that the world is hostile, and his truth is a death sentence for the life he has built. The real game changer happens when Scott realizes hockey gave him everything, but it cannot replace a person. His public acknowledgement in the finale is a staggering act of courage. He goes all in without any guarantees, and for the first time in his life, he chooses honesty and closeness over safety and career. Scott proves that you can only become genuinely free when you are willing to risk everything you have for the right to stop being alone. To sum up, Game Changer is not just another hockey story, and it is definitely not a disposable filler you can cut from the series without losing anything. On the contrary, it is a manifesto about dignity and self-worth that sets the moral standard for the entire cycle. We tend to look for sparks, drama, and emotional rupture in our stories, the way we get it with Ilya and Shane. But Scott and Kip give us something rarer, an example of what healthy limits actually look like inside an entirely unhealthy set of circumstances. This story teaches us that love should not be a justification for losing yourself. Kip, by leaving, showed that choosing yourself is not selfishness. It is the only way to survive when someone is trying to turn you into a convenient but invisible appendage to their success. And Scott, by coming out, proved that real success is not measured in trophies and contracts, but in the ability to be honest. Without this foundational precedent, Ilya Rozanov's own path would have been considerably darker and lonelier. Scott blasted that window of freedom open for the entire league, allowing the other characters to believe that it is possible to be the best at what you do without sacrificing who you are. In the end, Game Changer is a reminder that the most courageous thing in life is not winning the championship with the crowd roaring around you. The most courageous thing is finding the strength to step out of the gilded cage and simply take the hand of the person you love, without being afraid that the world might collapse. Because if it collapses over your truth, then that world was never worth hiding inside in the first place. If this kind of breakdown resonates with you, and you believe that healthy limits in a relationship matter more than any golden boy status, hit like. Tell us in the comments how you feel about Scott and Kip. Do they seem boring to you, or do you see in them the kind of steadiness that the other couples in the series are missing? Subscribe so you don't miss the next one. See you there.